In this chapter, we will discuss about the challenges in GST and how GST can benefit and impact various sectors. The major challenges in GST are listed here. Let's discuss them one by one. Number 1. Consent of states. For implementing, it is critical that GST bill is passed by respective state governments in state assemblies so as to bring majority. Number 2. Revenue neutral rate. In GST regime, the government revenue would not be the same as compared to the current system. Hence, through R&R government is to ensure that its revenue remains the same despite of giving tax credits. Number 3. Threshold limit in GST. While achieving broad-based tax structure under GST, both empowered committee and central government must ensure that lowering of threshold limit should not be a taxing burden on small businessmen in the country. Number 4. Robust IT network. Government has already incorporated goods and service tax network. GSTN has to develop GST portal which ensure technology support for registration, return filing, tax payment, IGST settlements, etc. Thus, there should be a robust IT backbone. Number 5. Extensive training to tax administration staff. GST is absolutely different from existing system. It therefore requires that tax administration staff at both center and state to be trained properly in terms of concept, legislation and procedure. Number 6. Numbers of enactments of statutes. There will be two types of GST laws. One at a central level called central GST, one at state level called state GST. As there seems to have different tax rates for goods and service at the central level and at the state level, and further division based on necessary and other property based on the need, location, geography and resources of each state. Number 7. Additional levy on GST. The purpose of additional levy is to compensate states for loss of revenue while moving to GST. We acknowledge that fundamental purpose of GST is to make India as one state where interstate movement of goods is common. In this situation, it would defeat the very purpose of GST in the country. Number 8. Clubbing taxes. The biggest challenge of GST implementation is bring all the indirect taxes under one roof, which is the biggest feature of GST. There has been opposition asking to include purchase tax by a few states. Other states are reluctant about alcohol, tobacco products coming under GST. This is due to the fact that a major chunk of state revenue is derived from these products. Number 9. Statutory requirements. As the imposition of GST will be delegated to both state and central government, the Constitution has to grant powers to both through an amendment. It is seen as a difficult task as the law expects at least 2/3 majority from the members of parliament, and that isn't easy given the current political scenario of the country. Number 10. Makeshift arrangements. State governments are demanding compensation from the central government as they foresee a major dent in the revenue due to CST losses. This is asked for the first 5 years after the implementation of GST, for which the central government has agreed to 3 years. A final conclusion is yet to be drawn. Number 11. Framework for tax disputes. There has to be a uniform legal procedure for tax disputes and litigations to avoid confusion. Number 12. Defining interstate transactions. With the transportation service available everywhere, the place of sale and consumption may not be the same. This makes it difficult to go forward with revenue allocation. Hence, it becomes important to define procedures to tackle such problems. Number 13. Infrastructure for collection process. Proper infrastructure has to be designed to track the movement of goods and services between states, collection and monitoring revenue, identify defaulters, etc. Number 14. Determining GST rates. This is the majority step in ensuring the success of GST. Arriving at rates which are conducive to both the government and public is willing to be a daunting task. The frame here shows some of the benefits of GST. You would like to pause the video to take a look at them. Let us now discuss the impact of GST on various sectors. Food industry. The application of GST to food items will have a significant impact on those who are living under subsistence level. But at the same time, a complete exemption for food items would drastically shrink the tax base. Even if the food is within the scope of GST, such sales would largely remain exempt due to small business registration threshold. Given the exemption of food from CEN VAT and 4% VAT on food item, the GST under a single rate would lead to a doubling of tax burden on food. Housing and construction industry. In India, construction and housing sector need to be included in the GST tax because construction sector is a significant contributor to the national economy. Implementation of proposed GST and opening of foreign direct investment are expected to fuel the growth and raise industry size to 95 billion. Rail sector. Rail sector included under the GST umbrella is expected to bring about significant tax gains and widen the tax net so as to keep overall GST rate low. This will have the added benefit of ensuring that all interstate transportation of goods can be tracked through the proposed informational technology network. Financial services. Under the service tax, India has followed the approach of bringing virtually all financial services within the ambit of tax where consideration for them is in the form of an explicit fee. GST also includes financial services on the above grounds only. Information technology enabled services. To be in sync with the best international practices, domestic supply of software should also attract GST on the basis of mode of transaction. Hence, if the software is transferred through electronic form, it should be considered as intellectual property and regarded as a service. And if the software is transmitted on media or any other tangible property, then it should be treated as goods and subject to GST. Small enterprises. There will be three categories of small enterprises in the GST regime. Those below threshold need not register for the GST. Those between the threshold and composition turnovers will have the option to pay a turnover-based tax or opt to join the GST regime. Those above threshold limit will need to be within the framework of GST possible downward changes in the threshold in some states consequent to the introduction of GST may result in obligation being created for some dealers